Oh wow, right on cue. Okay, so we're back. Let's see if we have some stragglers coming in to our main hall room. Just give folks a minute or so more. So, for those tuning in on the live stream, my name is Joshua Pisana. I'm a senior policy reporter for Politico Europe based in Berlin and tasked with writing about the auto industry and the transitions that it's going through right now. We just had a chat a few minutes ago about trucks and charging infrastructure. We're now moving on to the end of the internal combustion engine. Welcome to everybody in the room with us who get to enjoy not only this session live, but then also the roundtables we have on aviation, railways, and maritime later with myself, my colleagues Hannah Kokelayra and Mary Eccles. That will start at the conclusion of this panel around 4:20. Sadly, it's only for the people that are in the room. For those that are tuning in online, you can still ask a question through the Swap Card platform, the instructions for which you can find on the event website, which is obviously on the Politico Europe website. And if you're joining in person, you can ask your questions via Swap Card as well by scanning the rotating QR codes, which are apparently somewhere around, but I can't see. Oh, maybe it's up there behind me. And so, without further ado, let's introduce the speakers and get going. Guys, do you want to come on the stage? After you, Jan, Daniel, Jens. So, sit where you like. So we have here next to me Daniel Mez. He's the member of cabinet for the executive vice president of the European Commission. Frans Timmermans, he's going to be able to talk about what the Commission is doing to clean up road transport. Jan Thema, he's an MEP from the Netherlands, from the Renew Europe faction. He was the rapporteur on the car CO2 standards legislation, the de facto ban on the internal combustion engine from 2035. Then right at the end, we have Berta Cabello Calvo. She's the director for renewable fuels at Spanish energy company Repsol. And finally, here in the middle, I didn't forget about you, Jens Giesecke. He's an MEP from Germany and is very interested in car politics and was also shadow rapporteur on the car and van CO2 standards legislation. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
So, Daniel, let's just start with you from the European Commission side. Are you pretty happy that you've got the 2035 phase out for new sales of petrol and diesel cars and vans through?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we're still confident about the Parliament vote, which still needs to happen. But I would really say that is a pretty historic deal with a very clear direction. That in 2035, all new cars sold in Europe must be zero emission. And I think it's also the right target date. If you look at where the other parts of the world are going, China, US, I think it's the answer to also make sure that our industry leads in the technology that will matter for the future.
Okay, there are a few standing points of a European Parliament plenary vote, but the legislation is all but there. However, there was a vote today in the European Parliament Environment Committee, which was a lot tighter than one would have expected for this kind of confirmatory vote. Jens, maybe you could just talk us through that and the kind of things that the legislation left out in the end and why why some people like yourself are not very happy with the final stand.
Well, thank you, Joshua. Indeed, we had the vote in Envy this morning, and it was quite tight. We had 30 votes against, and even from my EPP, 5 members were missing. They were stuck in Brussels traffic, so next time we'll have 35 against. Let's work on that. So we have to prepare for the final vote in March, and I still, and there I have a different opinion from my colleague from the European Commission. I think we have a historical decision, a wrong decision. And this ban of combustion engine, in a way, is very one-sided. It will have severe consequences on employment. And so we have to double-check if this is the right direction to go. So I still have some, I would say, rest of hope that we can change something filtrally, but nevertheless, most likely there will be a majority to confirm the negotiation result we had with Council and Commission. So.
Okay, and Jan, you were of course the lead rapporteur on the file, and to a large extent you kind of got what you wanted there. Just obviously our audience know this already probably a lot better than I do, but just to be clear, the final stance is a zero emissions tailpipe rule coming into force for new sales of cars and vans from 2035, and that effectively means only battery vehicles will be allowed. And that's very controversial because some people in the industry think that you should have left it wide open for alternative technologies.
Well, no, that's not true, because there are more zero-emission cars than only battery electric vehicles, for example, fuel cell hydrogen. But I know where your question comes from, and I'm from the Liberal Party, also the Liberal Party, of course, in the Netherlands. And when I took this rapporteurship, my first thought was the same as Jens. Like, do we have to ban the combustion engines? And that's not a Liberal point of view. But as a rapporteur, you have to be, of course, objective, open-minded, and talk to all the stakeholders. And I changed our opinion, and I think it was backed up not only by the Parliament, but also by the Council. And I do have the feeling that we made the right decision here. And this is not only because of more the green lobby, but also, for example, from car manufacturers themselves. I do tend to say that if the car lobby was very strongly opposing this, I doubt if we got it through the European Parliament.
Yeah, which is a fair point to make. Nevertheless, there is some dispute about the kind of fuels that could have been set aside in the legislation and given a future possibility to be used in passenger cars. Jens, do you just want to talk us through e-fuels, which came up in the previous debate a little bit, but what was your proposal for that specifically? Then we'll go to Repsol and see if the industry could make them at scale.
Well, from EPP point of view, we had some proposals which were, from my point of view, very smart, to have technological neutrality and a crediting scheme for e-fuels, which was voluntary. So no OEM would have been obliged to install or implement the system, just to have a toolbox and to have a competition for the best method to really reduce CO2. And if there is an option on fuels which are carbon-free, synthetic fuels, we should have this option, not exclude anything. So from a fundamental point of view, I'm against this theory that ban is the best political option. Unfortunately, in the Parliament, we missed 13 votes. It was quite tight. But we had no majority. This I have to accept, of course, and this is why Jan negotiated without any reference to e-fuels. We just have a recital which gives the Commission the mandate to check whether it's possible to have this option. But as I see the Commission for the moment, there is no willingness to really do something on this.
We're going to for sure come back to this issue in a minute, but I just wanted to go over to Repsol. It could potentially be a major producer of these kind of alternative fuels. How practical are they, given they don't really exist at the moment, and those that do in very limited cases are extremely expensive to produce? What's the scalability and commercial viability of these alternative carbon-free fuels?
Let me start saying that I'm a chemical engineer. I'm not an expert on regulation, but at the end of the day, regulation is the framework in which I will be producing these renewable fuels. And well, they are already a reality. It's true that the production capacity is not really high, but we have a lot of investments going on to increase the production capacity, and we need an open framework, an open regulation to let us chemical engineers do our job and propose new things. We think that the success to reach climate neutrality depends on having all the options. Renewable fuels won't be successful without electrification, and the other way around. And we see that also in road transport and in passenger cars. It was said in the previous panel, let's focus renewable fuels in hard-to-abate sectors like aviation and marine. And it's a fair and reasonable question. But I would say from a real producer perspective, the scale of the road transport sector is a reality. And we need to develop the technologies and reduce the costs of production of those fuels. And we need the volume of road transport to do so for aviation and marine in the long term.
Understood. I think it's important just to come to the point of the 2026 review clause inside the legislation, because this is kind of customary in any EU legislation. You have a review clause at some point, and it was greatly celebrated when there was the trilogue deal on this some weeks ago to firm up the 2035 zero emissions mandate. And then omnipresent Internal Market Commissioner Thierry Breton came out and said, actually, maybe there's a way in 2026 to rethink that total zero emissions mandate. Daniel, what's the view from inside the Commission? Is there a chance that later that changes could be made based on the German clause that was inserted? Do you foresee changes to this legislation moving forward?
No, you're absolutely right. Like, a review is a standard thing we do when we set a new rule, and it also makes sense, because once you have a new rule, you have to check the reality, see whether the progress on the ground matches what you want to achieve with your targets, and especially in this field, that is very important, because the challenge is formidable, and I think that nobody on this stage denies that. So standard part, and of course after the comments of our Internal Market Commission, that's the way it goes. The two gentlemen had a talk, my boss and him. The view of the Commission is firmly 2035. The date has just been agreed provisionally agreed by Parliament and Council. So in that sense, it's set in stone, and the direction is clear. Europe would move towards for predominantly electric car markets. I also think that for industry, our own industry, the European car makers, it's super important that we give this clarity of direction. Whenever they speak to my boss, that is the thing that they're asking. Give me clarity on where I need to go. And as Jan already said, many car makers were actively lobbying us against things like e-fuel credits, because they want to have that clarity. It's like, that's where we're going. Electric cars, please help us. I think that makes sense, because if you look at the US with the Inflation Reduction Act, what they're doing with all the incentives. You look at China, 80 new electric car models. You want your European car industry to lead in the future. So that's the clear direction. And then, of course, the review will happen. There will be a working group. And again, that working group that will be set up, both the climate department and the industry department will be involved and drive that process. That review is about seeing how the 2030 target can be met. It's not a review to second guess it again right after the ink is dry on your deal. But what Mr. Breton is absolutely right about, and really right about, is that this challenge is formidable. We need to approach this indeed with hardcore realism. We need to solve many issues to make all of this happen, be it access to critical raw materials, charging that is convenient for people to actually make the switch to electric mobility. The whole energy grid needs to be paired. A lot needs to happen, so it makes total sense that our industry commissioner is stepping in with his own expertise and his own drive. I only know him as a person with a lot of drive to help us to get there. But that's the view of the Commission when it comes to the 2035 target and the role of the review. We will assess the contribution of e-fuels to all of this. That's what we promised at the end of the trilogue, what we will do. But the only thing I'm saying about that is we have to have an open dialogue about that, because there are serious limitations to these fuels in personal cars going forward.
Yeah, and also in terms of where they would be needed in aviation, in maritime and heavy-duty transport moving forward. Jens, just wanted to come to you on this, because this was a huge issue. We spoke about this a lot during the negotiations around the file. This thing about the non-binding recital that was included in the final version of the text, the request of the German government. How much hope do you have that actually this will be considered later, that e-fuels might have a future in passenger cars after 2020 or 2035?
So that was for Jens, right?
Jens first, but then also Jan, would be good to get your view too. Okay.
Yeah, I think there's no real option for e-fuels now, because we just have this recital, and negotiations. There was this hard fight to have an article on that, regulatory binding for the Commission, but this didn't happen. So it's just wishful thinking that we can have something there on e-fuels. So the potential for e-fuels will be in aviation and in the maritime sector. But of course, there is till 2035. We have a long way to go. And for the existing fleet, there is, of course, a possibility to use those e-fuels if they are ready, and that would be the preferred option. But if I may come to the Inflation Act from the States, Gladly. Which the Commission mentioned, that's very right. But the hope from the industry perspective was that we in Europe have the battery production, for example, then in Europe. And if we see the reality today, we have to see that every investment goes to US because of the subsidies. We do regulation, we do standards, and they give money. And this is, of course, a poor decision. We have now the decision of Tesla from Northvolt, and all those battery production factories go to the US. We will lose jobs in the combustion engine, 500,000 jobs, up to 1.5 million in the whole value chain. And so there where we had the hope to get new jobs, there is almost nothing. And that is a very poor perspective. And so far we have no European answer to have a
Yeah, Jens is right. The geopolitical context around electric vehicles has changed incredibly over the last few months. What's your perspective, Jan, on the lay of the land? And are the assumptions that you had a year ago when you were really working on this file, do they stand today?
No, they do. Like, for example, if you have the example of e-fuels, that will play an important role, and I'm very happy that you're working on this. But I don't believe that you can produce enough e-fuels for all the cars there is. Basically, it's the mathematics also that counts. So you need 5 units of electricity to make 1 unit of e-fuels, for example. Well, we simply don't have to. We simply will not have enough capacity to make all that power and renewable power, because that's of course in the deal, to make such amounts of e-fuels. So then it's, I think, smart to say, okay, what kind of vehicles do we want to prefer to drive on e-fuels? Of course, you have still the existing fleet. That's a huge market. But then you have also means of transport. It's very difficult to equip with maybe a battery electric, with batteries. So, for example, I'm from agriculture, tractors, maybe even heavy-duty vehicles, ships, aviation. So we have to be a little bit reasonable here as well. And I think this legislation makes it very clear that a passenger car is lightweight and you can simply plug it in to your energy grid. That's much more efficient. We have to think like this, especially in a geopolitical perspective. But you're right. We should not be naive as the European Union. I think one worry that I have is indeed critical raw materials, but that's not only for batteries for electric cars, it's for the whole transition. It's for making windmills, it's for making robots, it's for everything. So it's not the case that we don't have enough of those resources, but we as European Union should invest in to get that resources also to the European continent. That is the main plea that I would like to make.
If you let me continue,
Sure.
When you talk about 2035 and the existing fleet, it's okay, but if you talk in industrial and technology scale, that's not so much time. I mean, an industrial project takes around 4 to 5 years from concept to the startup, and then an investment of 600 million euros, for example, as you can imagine, it needs a long term to be giving profits to make it really a point to make. So it's not so much time. And chemistry is really stubborn. It was said before. It's very difficult and it's not cost efficient to produce only eSAF. We will produce other components for gasoline and we will produce other components for diesel. So we have to think about the whole picture. So I really think that we need to promote new technologies like electrification, but the ban is really limiting the decision for investments. Let me give you an example. I lived 4 years in Cartagena. That is a really nice place. You need to go there.
Colombia?
No, Cartagena.
Oh.
Murcia, much better. I've never been in Cartagena, Colombia. But it's a place where the employment is really limited. It's based a lot in the refinery we have there. And what we are trying to do is take the agricultural waste that is produced there, so security of supply, we're using raw materials for there, circular economy, because the agricultural waste is a problem in the region, and we will be producing not e-fuels, they are really advanced biofuels that will be used in that region that is really very low electrified, very difficult to promote electrification because of how is the population is distributed. So it makes sense. It's employment, circular economy, it's a reduction of emissions, but those investment decisions made only in the future aviation and marine demand and the existing fleet are very difficult to make for the industry.
Yeah, I don't believe it so much. If you see the studies, it's a huge demand still, even if with this target for renewable fuels, advanced fuels and e-fuels, and simply it's simply not enough. We have to do more, and then we have to really make the choice: where do you want to spend your e-fuels and your advanced biofuels to? And then, like I said again, you have to choose wisely to use it for those kind of means of transport, or maybe even industries. And you have also steel production that you need a very high thermal power, cannot be equipped with pure electricity, to make wise decisions. And one of the elements is that a passenger car is very easy to directly plug in to the energy grid. Save that demand for all the other sectors that demand those fuels as well.
Either of you two have a point to make to that? Should we develop the conversation? I think it's quite clear where you all stand on the issue of e-fuels and carbon neutral, synthetic, liquid fuels, whatever you like to call them. But I did want to come back to you, Daniel, simply because it seems to me, anyway, that as soon as you answer one question, you create 2 or 3 or 4 more. So you have a deal now on the 2035 phase out. However, you have a semiconductor shortage, so there has to be a CHIPS Act. Then you also have the raw critical materials situation, critical raw materials. So then you need to have legislation next year that mandates potentially stockpiles of lithium reserves. Is this a huge headache now for the Commission? I mean, did you anticipate that this was going to happen when you first sat down with your colleagues to try and figure out when you should mandate the 100% zero emissions?
Yeah, I think that Jens made a good point in the sense that because when it comes to job losses, when you make the shift to electric mobility, of course people are quoting often numbers of jobs that are lost, and many of them are inflated. And we've always said, like, listen, you will have many jobs that you will create, and it's not a question of job losses. It's a question of getting one person to get from a job that might disappear to a job that will stay. And that, of course, stands or falls with how successful you are in Europe in building this new economy and this new industry. And we've indeed so far relied mostly on, open markets will bring us the solutions that we need and the critical raw materials at scale at affordable prices. And what's happening in the US, let's be honest, that is changing the name of the global game. And it's really, I think, a call to arms for Europe also to think about, indeed, Jens, now that we have the standards, we should not have them alone. We now need a strong industrial arm to underpin what we want to achieve under those targets. We have a task force to still talk with the US and headed at the very highest level, the European Commission, which we hope will produce the right results, because let's face it, we've been giving in Europe lots of purchase subsidies for electric cars, and Tesla was a beneficiary, and we want then the same. If we invite Tesla to our party, we want to be, as Volkswagen and others, invited to their party as well. So we still hope that task will really yield results. But the Critical Raw Materials Act that will be upcoming will be crucial. And for us, as a cabinet to EVP Timmermans, when it comes to all these access to all these raw materials that we need, there are no taboos on mining some of them in Europe, if that happens in a sustainable fashion. But we really need to focus on where the real dependencies are. If you look at the dependencies, the biggest are actually in the processing and the refining of things, like cathodes and anodes and that kind of stuff. And that is actually something that we believe should also be built at scale with this Critical Raw Materials Act, so that we have more of that processing and refining of these raw materials in Europe. The benefit of that is that the exact same expertise you can use to recycle these materials. We are going to live in a world where we need to make the smartest use of the materials that we have. So for us, the Critical Raw Materials Act is key, and also for us as a cabinet to EVP Timmermans, the shift to electric mobility should really be one of the areas that are front and center in what is coming up next year with Mr. Breton.
Any idea when we might get some news out of the task force dealing with a response to the IRA?
That is still a process that is indeed ongoing. But I think that when you look at it, like Commissioner Breton said, okay, this process is ongoing, but ultimately, if that doesn't work, we need to think in Europe about a comprehensive response when it comes to boost to our own crucial production facilities that we need, and how we scale up technologies. And I understand that sentiment from our industry commissioner.
Yeah, and it seems, Jens, that the Earth is really moving underneath our feet at the moment, because we've talked a lot before about jobs, and you referenced it earlier, and clearly there's a lot on the line now in terms of car component plants and this kind of stuff. But the Inflation Reduction Act and the situation in the US really changes that game, because it could serve as an accelerator for the processes of displacement and of companies reallocating production outside the EU in certain cases. In your constituency, I think it's Niedersachsen, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yep.
So this is a very car-rich part of Germany where Volkswagen is based. Well, what do your constituents say about this? Is this something they're very worried about?
Of course, there is much uncertainty, and you see that the decisions have to be made today, the investment decisions. And if you have the signals that huge battery plants do not go to Europe, but go to other parts, especially to US and to China, the people do not know if their job is certain. And there I have a huge criticism because the story in Brussels that has been told was there will be a just transition. It will be fair, no one left behind. And the truth is, if we look on this file, now I described already the consequences. We will have many, we can have dispute on the numbers, but nevertheless there will be many of them. We will have a lot of job losses. And we have no single euro, that is what Timmermans said, for transition, for reskilling, no money for the region. And so we will, if it comes to that scenario, we will have no euro in order to have a fallback position for those people. And to make this point very, very clear,
what he said.
I want the Volkswagen success story in electrification. But the truth is, of course, we do not have the raw materials. The strategy, so nice to have, but we don't have them. The Chinese are an advantage if it comes to the technology, and they have the raw materials. And if it comes to pricing, they have perhaps 1/3 of the price that we pay for our Volkswagen and our Teslas. The consumer decision in the next 2 years will be very clear. If the people do not have much money, they will decide for the Chinese product, not for the European. And that is.
There are, of course, some studies that say that actually many other jobs will be created, roughly approximate to the number that could be lost in the transition. But inevitably, there will be completely different jobs and depend on finding people with skills and training the relevant people in battery cell chemistry and these kind of things. Daniel, I just wanted to come back to you because you just had a point.
Yeah, because Jens said, Frans said there's not a single euro for persons that need to reskill. That's absolutely false. It's really not what he said during that trialogue where I was also present.
So it was a quote,
we clearly see, no, it's not a quote, like I was there.
I was there.
The quote was as follows. We need to mobilize all the funding streams that we have. There was a discussion about like lots of new funding under the 7-year budget. The MFF is rather empty right now. But that doesn't mean that you need to muster all the forces that you need in terms of financial resources, support for reskilling, of everything that you have. And there's a lot already out there. There's still a lot that needs to be built up. We are putting 20 billion euros already in total in our battery value chain. Electrification and software will be central skills in the new economy for people to learn, to shift to these new jobs. We will devote lots of attention to that also on our skills programs and our year of skills to come. And industry knows it because I also speak a lot with industry, Jens, and I also speak a lot with the component supply chains. I actually feel very passionate personally about this because my boss, my father was a lifelong employee of Bosch and started as a simple electrician. Then new people came from Spain and Portugal at the time, and he had to retrain, and he became an electrical engineer, and ultimately, because other people come in, he became a software engineer. So I feel very passionate about the reskilling. Let there be no doubt about that. And we will muster what we can. What we need to do is indeed sit together with those regions where this is a particularly acute issue, and in your country there are many of them. And I would say, these are just transition regions, just like other regions are just transition regions because they have to go from coal. And we need to think about really dedicated programs to help people there to shift to these new jobs.
So I don't want to be flippant about it, but one way to resolve who said what would be simply to make trialogues open to the public and us journalists to see it. Then we could say exactly.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah, and you were there too.
We take this idea, that's a good idea.
Who said what?
Yeah, I don't know what they were saying. We were negotiating, you know, with the council.
No.
But two things that I want more on the social dimension. I think for the parliament that was a huge issue. And second, on the dependency. On the social dimension, you should not forget that even without this legislation, the market, the car market will change completely. Everybody says the tendency is already to battery electric vehicles, maybe even 90 or maybe even 100%, and already before 2035. You see a lot of car manufacturers have a portfolio already in 2030. I think that's why it's important that we have this legislation, that we give indeed already certainty, that people know up front what's heading and that we can do something about this. And that's what we put also in the provisions, that we have the progress report, that we're monitoring how that transition, that fair transition is going, and if needed, that there should be adequate funding for that. That's one. Second, on the dependency, now you're absolutely right. I'm worried about that as well, but not only for the electric cars. And we have to keep in mind that we are now super dependent on one element that we tend to forget, fossil fuels. We are super dependent on fossil fuels at the moment. Russia. We try to move away from that dependency. Okay, and then you can say, is it wise enough to do it with battery electric vehicles because we need the raw materials for the batteries, or go maybe to the e-fuels? I said already with the e-fuels, you need 5 times more electricity for this. 5 times more electricity means also 5 times maybe more solar panels, 5 times more windmills, 5 times where do we need the materials for the solar panels and for the windmills? Again, the raw materials from China. So if you really go more to the e-fuel side, I would not be surprised if we would be more even dependent on foreign countries there.
Bertha?
Two things. The first about this, what you said, we are all the time talking about e-fuels. There are other things. I completely agree that won't be 100% of the fuels we need for the future transport, but we have to deal with the waste that we generate. It's a problem in Europe. We need to cover the municipal solid waste, industrial waste. We need to cover agricultural and livestock sector waste, that at least in Spain is a very important sector for the economy. And there is a role also for renewable fuels. And again, I know you would tell me existing fleet, aviation and marine, but to go faster, we need the scale of the road transport sector. And let's see, because there will be a lot of limits. I mean, no technology, no option is perfect, unfortunately. And we are developing, we are seeing a lot of constraints in permits, a lot of constraints in project development. And talking about talent and jobs, I'm a chemical engineer. I'm offering you to use all the chemical engineers working in the refining fuel sector to look for other alternatives. It's 140,000 direct people in Europe, more than 600,000 people around the refining industry. We are loving to work in this. People want to not depend on fossil fuels and create new things. But let's promote, not ban. Clear framework, great, but the ban is there limiting what we can do. So it's the only thing that we ask.
Please, Jens.
So on our little dispute on who said what, Jan, our rapporteur, this is why he is the rapporteur, made the perfect explanation. We will have a progress report till 2025, and then we have to check whether we get some fresh money. So there is no fresh money today, full stop.
You look like you want to say something.
Yeah, because the question is, you know, how can you also mobilize all the existing things that you have, bring them together with a big bazooka that can help in this transition? And the fact remains, Jens, you also from the party who likes budgetary discipline, you keep on banging on about that, and the multi-annual financial framework is rather empty. That's the only thing that my boss said, but he's fully on board to mobilize all the resources. And actually the suggestion to have adequate funding when necessary came directly from him during that trilogue. So let's be clear about his support for this transition.
We'll have to have him here
I think we were talking about money and worried about money. I'm much more worried that we have enough technical people for the future to make this transition.
Indeed, the skills are essential, the reskilling.
Well, which is actually exactly what I wanted to get onto, because I think this is an area that hasn't been greatly discussed yet. and we should talk about it now in the 12 minutes or so we have left, because I know there are lots of jobs on the line in conventional historical automotive centres of Europe, such as the area around Stuttgart, in Lower Saxony and elsewhere. It seems to us, because we inside the Politico newsroom were talking for a long time about the potential cost of the electrification drive in parts of Central Europe, which have long been used to producing vehicles. For example, Slovakia, the world's largest car maker per capita, also Hungary, where many engines are built for Audi, etc. However, it seems that the opposite is happening, that actually companies are flooding these countries with investment to build electric cars. BMW in Debrecen in Hungary, Audi in Győr, then you have major announcements across Slovakia. Spain is a very good example, so we'll come to this in a moment, Berta. But Daniel, do you think that there are great opportunities in areas that have traditionally been depressed economically? In addition to wonderful trains and great food, Spain has a lot of sunlight and could actually be quite a continental hub for the production of these renewably generated fuels or battery cells. I wondered what your take inside the Commission is on this.
Yeah, there are two things. Two things in there. Indeed, I think that a country like Slovakia, but also Czechia and Romania, who have big supply chains that are currently working mostly on the combustion engine. They are facing sort of a double political game in a sense. On the one hand, you have the US that will start like accelerating the move towards electric car production in the US. China will bring 80 new electric car models to the market this year alone. So that is sort of like something that also my boss is telling them. He visited these car plants in that region personally, and he also told them, like, you know, listen, don't get hung up in producing like combustion engine cars for far too long and be sort of like at the very end the one doing that. I really want you, and you deserve the jobs of the future. At the same time, internally, Spain is a very good example. Spain has a very, very clear ambition right now to be an electric mobility leader. And indeed, what they do really well, and that is very, very important, because we haven't talked about that yet, because I fully realize, you know, I don't drive electric myself yet, because like I have 3 kids. We have 3 kids, so we're a big family. I'm waiting for the new affordable car model that is electric to do it. But in terms of convenience for the people to shift, 2 important people in my life did make that switch, and I don't want to get too anecdotal, but it's my father-in-law who votes for Jens's party, and it's my own father, and it's my own father who also doesn't vote for Frans' own party. One of them lives in a freestanding house, and the other one lives in social housing. Both of them make the shift to electric mobility far ahead of me, because they installed solar panels on their roofs. My father-in-law installed solar panels and realized, listen, I can mostly drive for free. Nobody can predict the energy prices going forward right now, but most of the time it's very economic to do so, and he bought 2 electric cars.
Well, do you mind me asking, where do they live? In the Netherlands, or?
My father-in-law lives in Berlin, and my parents themselves live in a social housing project in Zeeland. So they're not as affluent as I am, but it was a social housing project that had the requirement to have solar panels already on the roofs, ready to go, and charging in the garage. And my father, who really said, like, I will drive my combustion engine car until the very end of my lifetime, despite your work, Daniel, whatever you do, is now also saying, I'm going to buy electric. So that integration, that integrated thinking of like the energy transition, solar panels, is really crucial to make this experience as convenient as possible, because we all do know that in order to get there, we need to be able to get to the people that they think it's a convenient choice. People do buy their car with their heart, basically, but they also need to feel that they can drive around just as flexibly. I don't think that a consumer buys a car, I'm desperate to have a combustion engine in there. What they want is a car that brings them flexibly everywhere in the right time.
Some people in Germany, especially, like the growl of a combustion engine. I hear this all the time. But increasingly fewer. Jan, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, no, but I think that was the main motivation also to take this file as a rapporteur, to make car driving still possible in the future. Because if you look to what else is proposed, that is really destimulating car driving for a way. You have a lot of taxes, also maybe even CO2 tax. But for a lot of people, car driving is super important, especially from the countryside where I'm from. And I don't think it's fair that you give car drivers an extra burden because they emit CO2 and don't give them the right alternative. With this proposal, we'll give them a climate-friendly alternative that they don't have to pay, for example, that CO2 tax. That was for me key. And on top of that, you see already now that in a lot of circumstances, electric driving is more cost efficient, even the total cost of ownership. But yeah, the purchasing price of a new electric car is still 20% higher. So what we want to do is that not only rich people can afford an electric car and have the benefits of electric driving, but that also not only the premium segment is electrified, but also the other models, and also sooner that we create a second-hand and third-hand market. Because face it, 2/3 of the people, also in my country, don't buy a new car. It's existing cars, and especially in other parts of the European Union, they depend on the second-hand market, and there should be an availability of that option.
Jens, and then we'll go back to Bertel.
Just to make one point, of course, when the Commission made the impact assessment on the CO2 cars regulation, there was an electricity price of 4 cents. Now we have up to 40, 45, 50 cents. So we have to check that even the electrification is expensive, that we have to accept. And of course, I agree, we have those kind of low-hanging fruits. I have a solar panel on my rooftop as well. So for me, it might be an option to drive an electric car. But I want to come to one point. I think they have an agreement with my colleague from the Commission. I have to open this door as well. On the AFIR, you know, for the moment, we have 70% of the loading infrastructure just in Germany, France, and Netherlands, and we have to have a European success story on infrastructure. That is key, and so in a way, we are a front runner with CO2, but the AFIR has to follow now very close, because in Eastern Europe, the people have no willingness to really go forward with electrification. And if you just go, I like my friends in the Netherlands, if you just circle around France, Netherlands, and Germany, that is not a European approach. So there we need to speed up.
Absolutely.
But just to talk about the Spanish situation, say whatever you like to the points just made, but I'm really interested to hear how a company like Repsol tries to reckon with this kind of situation now, because you're a traditional energy company. What do you do about shifting to a world of electric cars zipping around Spanish cities?
Well, we are not in the car manufacturing industry. We are refiners and chemical industry, and what we are doing is transforming our sites. We are investing to change the crude oil and natural gas that we put into the refineries to other type of raw materials, different type of waste, renewable hydrogen, of course, to produce low emissions alternatives for our customers. That's what we are doing. But of course, as I was mentioning, the impact that will have not been having an open option, the ban of the internal combustion engine is limiting the investments that we are making, because we don't have the certainty to have enough market, at least in this decade. That is the decade in which we need to scale up, we need to develop the technology, and we need to reduce the cost of those products. Because, I mean, we are talking about ideal situations. But if you go again to Cartagena, please go, you have to check how people live there. And they don't even understand what charging a vehicle means. They don't have a way, they don't have a garage. They don't know how to deal with that. So I'm not saying that in some cases the perfect solution will be an EV, but in some cases they need another option. So let's see in which situations it's better to use certain technology, and in which situations it's better to use other technologies.
Anybody have a point to make to that, or can we go on to China?
I think we always talk about battery electric vehicles, but I think one step before the e-fuels and the combustion is the hydrogen. And also indeed with advanced biofuels you can make hydrogen, and that is a very valuable option. Also that is possible, of course, with this legislation. And I think that is a very good thing to have.
Yeah, of course, and we have a lot of investments related with renewable hydrogen, and again, I think it will be part of the solution. So right now in my mind, and let's see how it comes, but I see 25, 25, 25, and 25. I mean, everything will be making a part of the solution to climate neutrality, for sure.
Let's see, Jens?
No, just if it now we have the ban for the cars, but if I look to the Commission and say they work hard and they prepare the next proposal on the heavy-duty trucks, which come in January, and so I hope they have Euro 7 already, and so we should not exercise this ban option a second time, because there are rumors going on. It just gives them 5 more years in 2040, and then you have a ban there as well. I think there just an all-electric approach is not needed. We should be technologically open in this file, and do not have a second time this mistake we did with the CO2 standards and cars regulation.
It's a very good point. It actually brings me perfectly on to the very final question I wanted to get all of your thoughts on, starting with you, Daniel. That's the question of China, because you have very senior auto executives over recent months have been complaining that Europe is opening the door to Chinese battery makers and now Chinese premium electric car makers. Yet it's not helping its own companies make the transformation quickly enough. So you have a situation where foreign companies are going to be gobbling up market share. This feeds into the debate over the IRA in the US. It feeds into the debate over Tesla's footprint in Europe too. I wonder, Daniel, is the European Commission really actually doing enough to support its own industrial captains rather than just foreign people? Do you see a difference between an electric vehicle made by a Chinese company, an American company, or by a European-based automaker?
No, I already said before that I do believe that we need a strong industrial arm next to the rulemaking that we're doing, the standards. But even in the rulemaking, we need to take this factor into account. And I think a very telling example is with city buses. Because the reality on the ground is that many cities, big cities that represent a big part of the market, they already want to only buy zero-emission buses by 2030 in order to reach their own climate ambitions. What you currently see is that indeed a lot of Chinese bus makers are the ones who are able to meet that demand because they're cheaper. So what you want to do, because also my commissioner wants to give European companies a fighting chance. You only have true competition in electric mobility if also our own makers have vehicle makers have a fighting chance there. So when it comes to what you then put in terms of standards, you know, CO2 standards for buses do help them to ramp up the supply. And if you ramp up the supply, that's the beauty of it. The buses also become cheaper, so that they have a fighting chance compared to the Chinese. But Jens is making a very good point. You do need to then sort out, like, you know, what role does Euro 7 play? What role does the CO2 standards play? And my hope is also a bit that given the fact that the truck CO2 standards will come out at the turn of the year, January, the latest according to the current planning, that perhaps in the Parliament these files will be treated together so that indeed we have a bit of a coherent approach that helps us to make that transition.
Okay, sadly we can't go around all of you and talk about China because we've run out of time and we have to run to further debates, but I do have one very one-word answer question for all of you to wrap up. I know the answers to some of these you've given that yourself, Daniel, but are you guys driving electric or combustion engine models of cars at the moment? Daniel, you're on the engine still, right?
Exactly, but I think that by 2025 I'm ready to go, because then the bigger models that can carry all my kids will be there.
Jens?
Have a guess.
Tesla, I think.
Electric.
No,
hydrogen.
it's a combustion engine. It's a diesel. 60,000 kilometers a year as a member of parliament. It's with electrification. Not possible.
Jan?
It's always funny because I see him in the garage and then he comes there with his, and I'm with the electric car. No, but I had
we
an
haven't
Audi.
had an accident so far. Huh?
No, not. I'm faster than you, eh?
No, not really. I'm yes,
way faster.
behind me,
Come on. We'll do outside track race.
Safely.
Yeah, no, it's so good fun. If you drive electric, I have a Tesla Model 3, a dual motor. It has more than 400 horsepower. If it's a combustion engine, bring it on.
Too many for you. Too many for you.
Faster.
But
I was driving a hybrid and I changed to diesel. Diesel, very low consumption, not a sub. I mean, nice aerodynamic diesel. So first thing for me is low consumption.
there you go. Thank you very much, guys. So that brings us to the end of this final full panel in the summit that we have going on this week. There's much more to come, but only for the people, sadly, in the room with us, who can join us for the roundtable conversations upstairs in various rooms to talk about railways with me, aviation with Mary Eccles, my colleague, and maritime with Hannah Kukalara, my colleague, sat at the back. Thank you to Daniel, thank you to Jens, thank you to Jan, thank you to Berta. Of course, some of you can go and see the race outside before joining the roundtable.
One bottle of wine.
Let me see if I've covered all the points I need to tell you about before we wrap up. Yeah, that's it. And you know, for our online participants, thank you very much for joining. I've got to thank again our partners, Coca-Cola and Europe, G, SQM.
Thank you.
The presenting partners, Braskem, CFIT, Google, Man Truck and Bus, Orsted, PepsiCo and PGE, and our networking partner, Chiesi and 3M. Thank you very much. Thank you, guys.
This is an age of disruption, of profound revolutionary change.
What we're really asking ministers is to empower the ambassadors.
The only thing that you really push forth is the truth.
You don't see many women represented when it comes to the decisions as to how to handle the pandemic.